Hey everybody, Quantum back here again, and in this video I want to go ahead and take a look at an Amber Ruby Simba aggro deck that I put together. I did test this deck, and later on in this video, in the timestamp, you can probably just skip ahead if you want to see the matches, but I've been calling for this for a long time, saying that we needed kind of like a de facto legendary Simba that had a really good effect, and we got one in set 6, the Pride Protector. This is a 5-cost uninkable 4/4 Simba that has shift 3, and there's a couple of already decent shift targets for this Simba, but it does quest for 2, and it has a nice little ability, Understand the Balance. At the end of your turn, if this character is exerted, you may ready your other characters. So in essence, this is like the ultimate bodyguard, so to speak. This card comes in, it's exerted, and it will just ready all of your characters. So, you know, even if this had bodyguard, you know, your opponent can still take out this card, leaving your other cards that are exerted vulnerable. Whereas a card with this effect actually readies up your other thing, so your opponent can really only challenge into this, and then even if they take out that Simba, your other characters are ready, so they're protected. So a pretty cool effect, something that I think slots very well into aggro, and I've opted to try out the Ruby version of this over something like Steel or Amethyst or something, because you do have access to mainly this Simba, the 2-cost uninkable 1/1 that quests for 3, the Scrappy Cub. And what's nice about this is you can pair this with the already in color Amber Simba that has Bodyguard, the Chapter 1 2-cost inkable 2/3 body with Bodyguard, in order to protect this. So if you play this on 2, you can maybe play this Simba on 3 to protect as a bodyguard, for example. You don't really want to shift on this Simba, but I guess you could if you have some particular lines of play where you can aggro out your opponent. In addition to that, I am opting to run the Kita line because I think, again, being an aggro-focused deck, just zeroing out the board to protect all of your low strength, low willpower characters that can quest for a lot, like the Lilo, like the Simba, Scrappy Cub, is a pretty good option. As well as Piglet, Pupira Captain, right? Protecting this is also a really good thing, and, you know, keeping the other characters on board so that this does get the +2 lore is also beneficial. The one thing I will say from testing is I don't think you necessarily will need to play this Simba. It doesn't really fit the strategy being an aggro deck. While it is a shift target, I just think it's not even worth playing after some testing. So I'd probably end up cutting this card and maybe playing another 1-drop aggro threat. Not a huge fan of the Daisy Duck in this one, but I guess that is an option that you could put in as well. The uninkable count is quite high though at 20, but again, you're capping out at the 5-cost incurve, so it's more than manageable. I am a huge fan of the Goofy in this deck, and of course, you know, the gatekeeper of playing Amber in real life is Rapunzel, being a very expensive card, but she is necessary. She is your only form of card draw in this deck, so once you run out of gas, you either need to see this Rapunzel or you're playing in top deck mode. Which can be a problem. But essentially what this deck aims to do is utilize either the Simba or the Kita in order to protect your board so that you can get an extra turn of questing, similar to what the Emerald Pegasus did on the shift line. These are just a little bit better. Well, the Simba does need to be exerted, but the Kita can come in and zero out a board. And so you're seeing me play just in time as my action. So we got 12 actions and 48 characters here. And you will see this card in action where we're able to drop a Kita off of this very early and protect our board and end the game by like turn 4, which is really strong. Obviously, being an aggro deck, you are very strong on the play. And we are opting to put in Mauis, which can be controversial, I know, because again, you're an aggro deck, why are you playing Mauis? You can make the same case for this Simba as well. But you still need some form of board management and board control, right? So the Maui coming in here really can help a lot. Especially if you're going up against Steel matchups, because once they drop a Tinkerbell, if you don't have an answer to it, you just lose the game pretty much, unless you can like really edge out the win with like a final quest or something. So just being able to manage that is very important. The just in time though can help you get out a Simba early if you don't have the shift line or you don't want to give up one of your smaller Simbas. Get this out early, then quest with it the next turn before it can be removed. It is a 4/4 body, so it dodges Medusa, Brawl, things like that. You can also just in time out Rapunzel for a quick heal if, like, let's say your Sisu was damaged the turn before, and you maybe have like a 1-drop to pair with the just in time so that you can get the Rapunzel out without having to just hard cast Rapunzel. You get the extra body out. There's a couple of little awkward lines that you can use in order to just keep the pressure on, but ideally you're going to want to just in time the Simba or the Kita or maybe even the Maui just to get that board control out early if you need to, if you're on the draw, sorry, for example. The brawls, again, just more board control cards because, you know, if you go up against Diablos or something like that, they can easily start running away with the game, especially if they drop Ursula, Deceiver of All, and start double singing to out your characters with, like, Let the Storm Rage On and whatnot. So brawling Ursulas and Diablos is still something you need to consider. Again, not something you want to do with an aggro deck, but the long and short of it is you still need some ways to mitigate some of the cards that really shut down aggro, right? And Ursula, Deceiver of All, singing a Strength, singing a Let the Storm Rage On can really hurt you. Diablo just goes unchecked for who knows how many turns if you don't deal with it, and you'll just lose the game in the long run anyways. And then I've opted to try this new card, which I'll probably end up taking out. It's basically a worse version of Gathering Knowledge, simply because at least with Gathering Knowledge, you have card draw and Amethyst that can keep refilling your hand, whereas with this ink pairing, like I said, you only have Rapunzel, so drawing into this, especially when you're in top deck mode, it's not really something you would expect to close out the game with because it's only gaining you one lore, so it's kind of underwhelming. You're probably better off cutting this and putting in something else. But all in all, this is the initial run at the deck list. I do like the Goofy here. I think, again, the non-questing sources of lore is very important to just be able to close out a game or edge out that unexpected lore gain that can put you over the threshold to win the game on the next turn or something, or even on that turn. You know, once you're at 18 lore, all it takes is your opponent to exert something, and then you can just drop a Goofy or two, right? And then take out, you know, if you're at 16 or 18 lore, it just takes 1 or 2 Goofies to close out the game from there. So when you can't get anything to stick, once you kind of aggroed out in the early game, Goofy is a great closer for that also. But yeah, that's the deck list. Let's go ahead and jump into some matches and see how the deck performed. So in this first matchup, you're going to see the real power of this deck when it's on the play. Let me know in the comment section if there's any other deck, like aggro deck, that has as fast as a clock as this one, because I think we win basically by the end of my opponent's turn 3 when we're on the play here. It's actually quite remarkable how fast this deck can be. You don't necessarily need like an ideal hand either, as long as you have like a good just-in-time target, which again goes back to maybe how you want to edit the deck, like I was talking about in the beginning. You can see me putting back the 1-drop Simba there. It doesn't really fit this deck, even though it is a Simba name for the shift target. Like, you have 8 other Simbas in the deck you could be using for that shift if you really wanted to. So I think you're just better off in fishing for another good 1 or 2 drop to play, because when you're on the play here and you get this kind of line going, especially against slower decks like Sapphire control decks, you can really just close the game out super fast. And Sapphire is looking like it will be the best color in the game moving into set 6. I think Emerald was holding that title for a little while. Sapphire either equaling or being a close second. But with some of the new stuff that like Red-Blue got in particular, I think it's going to be really strong. Here my opponent is obviously testing out the Steel variation. But you know, a Popsicle on turn 1 means that I can freely quest with my Lilo. So I opt to play the Simba instead of the Piglet because, again, the 1 or 2 willpower doesn't really matter. If they have Fire the Cannons, it's going to take out the Piglet anyways. And at least the Simba guarantees the 3 lore without having the condition of having 2 other characters, but it's also the Simba name, which is also kind of nice. So my opponent here recognizes that they need to put some threats on board, so they opt to put a Smee out instead of going for something else. My opponent was on like an Oswald build here, so that's also some of the new cards that are coming out in set 6 for the item deck. But because we see the Mr. Smee, I'm going to be able to drop this Kita off of the Just in Time on turn 3, which zeroes out their Mr. Smee, which means I can get another 5 lore in with my Lilo and Simba. My opponent only being on 2 ink, if they don't have a removal spell, they're not going to be able to clear up my board, which means I do get, 7 lore next turn, going to 14 because the Kita will also quest. So they just drop another Mr. Smee, and I'm hoping that they quest with this one. It takes 1 damage, and that's great because I have a Sisu into a Goofy, which will get me an additional 2 lore and clear that Smee off the board. We draw a Rapunzel here, and that's even better because my Goofy will survive with 3 damage. And if they want to throw either a spell or their other Mr. Smee into this Goofy to out it, that's fine because it means my other aggro threats survive and I just win the game next turn anyways. Or they opt to take out my Lilo, Simba, or Kita, and my Goofy has the 3 damage, which I'm able to heal and draw 3 off the Rapunzel, which also puts a 2 quester on board. So here my opponent draws, it's their turn 4, and they just can't deal with the board fast enough. They can't grab your swords, right? They don't have enough ink. They can't Tinkerbell. They just don't have anything to remove our threats on board, right? They're probably playing baboons and or fire the cannons, but they just don't see it. And honestly, it wouldn't be enough in this scenario to slow me down as much as they would need to. Here, I'm just checking the AZURITE C because I think I thought that you had to ink and then draw, because I'm just so used to seeing that in how things are, or how cards are written in sequence. But no, it's you can draw a card and then you can choose if you want to ink or not, which is actually crazy. So my opponent just ends up conceding here, and I'm like, I didn't even see any of the new set cards. Like, are they in the deck here? So I'm flipping over. There's the Thievery, but no Simba found. But would we even want to shift it on top of the other Simba? Because that one's questing for 3. Maybe once we know that Simba is vulnerable, which is a good line of play, that you can shift on the stronger Simba, being a 4/4 body that will ready up your other characters, is really, really strong. Just like what the Kita did, right? Protecting your board for that additional quest next turn since your characters are ready. So a really nice play there. In this next matchup, we are going to be going second, and there's a couple of Simbas there and 3 Thieveries. And I'm like, this is really weird. I don't I don't know how you draw like this. It's kind of really strange. But I do have a 1-drop and a 2-drop, so I'm probably going to opt to keep those and just hope I draw into something a little bit more playable. And we do. We have the Just in Time. We've got a couple of Lilos, so we probably don't go for the 1-drop Kita in this scenario, which, again, you can argue you don't even want to play the 1-drop Kita here, because how often are you really going to want to play that as your preferred 1-drop? You might be better off just, again, going for more aggressive 1-drops that you could play, because you're looking to ideally just in time the Kita or just hard cast the Kita for the protection on 5. But yeah, having the shift line available I don't think is necessarily the worst. It's just hard to see me justifying playing out the 1-drop Kita when you have like Lilos and stuff, and then that makes the shift line very awkward to go for, because you do lose your 1-drop, right? You lose your 1-drop character when you shift. Yes, you get a two questing beefier character in the 5-drop Kita on board, but I think what you saw me do in the first game, where like I was able to get that 5 questing pressure on board between the Simba and the Lilo, and then just in time into the Kita, was a great line of play there. Anyways, we're gonna ink and drop a Lilo. My opponent starts on the play, obviously, with a Popsicle. Let's see what they're going to be able to do in order to check the aggro threats this time around. Again, being on the draw presents us as the aggro player with a disadvantage, but if it's one of the matchups that we're going to actually have a chance in order to win, it is going to be against the slower control deck. So here my opponent is able to drop an Oswald onto, so not the Mr. Smee. And this Oswald is definitely a scary card in these item heavy decks, being able to just straight up play any costed item for free if it reveals it. But we are going to go ahead and quest with the Lilo, because I'm going to put my opponent on, if you want to challenge with your Oswald, I'll take that trade. Your 2-cost character for my 1-cost character. I've already gained 2 lore off of it, because Oswald is a 2/1, which means that they would trade out with the Lilo. They take out the Lilo, but the Lilo would also end up taking out the Oswald. They're going to ink a Fortisphere, which will allow them to reveal their card. It's a Hiram. Good, happy to see that go to the bottom of the deck. And no item being played for free, which is great. But yeah, this Oswald is definitely a very interesting card for Ravensburger to have printed. My opponent plays the Pete, and I'm just like, man, you got to be kidding me, because I have the Just in Time, and I draw into a Kita here too. That would have been so nice. But the Just in Time, well, I guess I wouldn't really want to play out the Goofy here, right? That doesn't make much sense because there's nothing exerted. But yeah, drawing into the Kita would have been really nice for that Just in Time, right? Because then I would have had that 5 questing pressure for the next 2 turns with the Piglet and the Lilo. So instead, we're going to have to go for a Sisu. And you can argue that, maybe I shouldn't be questing here. I should wait. But the longer I wait with the Steel deck, the more at risk I put myself in, them dropping Tinkerbells. So I think I just have to continue to quest and just hope that I can push through. So they're going to play the new Aurora, the Dream. I think this one's Dreaming Guardian, which gives their items ward, but also allows them to scry. And this is kind of the combo that you could run with this ink pairing, where they're able to look at the top card of their deck by exerting an item, and then they know, is this a card that I want to keep on the top or put it to the bottom? because then they can now ink with their just ink for turn and then trigger the Oswald, and because they knew with Aurora, if the card that they kept was an item, they can get that for free. Or they can take a gamble and put that card, if it's not an item, to the bottom and just hope that they reveal an item with the Oswald. So an interesting combination there to utilize. But yeah, we're in a little bit of trouble. They opt to take out the Piglet with the Smee, and we're going to use 4 ink to drop the Goofy and take out the Pete, which gains us 2 lore, putting us to 9, and then we're going to be able to quest with both of these and go to 13. Now, the Oswald and the Aurora probably don't want to do too much to control the board state. The Sisu having the 4 toughness does hurt. It's a bit of a problem for them to get through. They can definitely challenge the Lilo if they want, but yeah, they're risking losing some of their board if they do so. So they use the Aurora, opt to put, I think that one, they don't have to reveal it to me, but I think that was a Visions of the Future. They put that to the bottom, and then I think they're going to ink for turn and reveal off Oswald. So, in theory, Oswald should be a good card, but, it depends on how many items you play. Yeah, sometimes you just miss every time, right? But, can you just imagine Oswald hitting like a lucky dime or something like really significant off the top? You can even play some of these items that are just like really bad, like the Steel Chromacon, 6 cost uninkable item, but imagine playing that for free and then just getting free 1 damage every turn. That would just beat aggro straight up. Like if they even got one of those Steel Chromacons, if I don't even know if my friend was playing it here, but if they were, right, just getting 1 Steel Chromacon on board for free off the Oswald. Like, could you imagine getting that on turn 2? I would just be cooked, right? Any aggro deck would just be cooked. And to be fair, Steel already has a pretty good time against aggro, but yeah, this is a bit of an issue here. So they do have another hero, which is again a problem because they do have some good card draw. The Dreaming, I don't know if it's Dreaming Guardian, but the Aurora here is going to opt to take out the Goofy, and then they're going to eventually trade out their Oswald into my Lilo. So they do clean up the board a bit there, but the Sisu still remains kind of strong. We're going to draw a Brawl for turn, which is actually not too bad. The issue here is they are on 5 ink, and I should have had the foresight to realize that I'm in Tinkerbell range. So I opt to drop my Sisu and take out the Aurora, which again is probably a mistake. I should just quest, right? The Aurora isn't doing anything. If they want to challenge the Aurora, the Sisu with their Aurora to out it, that's fine. Being an aggro deck, I should be the one that is questing. So I just didn't see the Tinkerbell coming. That's a huge misplay on my side, just like not recognizing that was coming through. But the Tinkerbell comes down, takes out both of my cards there. Because if I would have quested instead of taking out the Aurora, I could drop this Simba. I would have been at 15, and now I'm threatening the Simba, putting me to 18 if they don't have another card to out this Simba. Now they do. They have a second Tinkerbell here, which outs the Simba. So that's a bit of an issue. And this is where drawing that 1-drop Simba is just super underwhelming. I can't ink, right? So I have to just play this just in time and get no value off of this Kita coming down, right? I'm going to be able to quest next turn for 2, but then the Kita just gets mopped up. And then the issue is whatever I play alongside the Kita gets mopped up by the Tinkerbell most likely as well. Because if the Tinkerbell is able to throw even both the Tinkerbells into the Kita, and then they're going to be able to deal 2 damage to something, which is whatever else I put on board. The Maurice's Workshop comes in from the opponent, and now they're starting to get set up, so the game is definitely running away from me. Again, if I would have quested with that Sisu, I would have been at 15. I would go to 17 here. Yeah, I mean, I still wouldn't be in the best spot. I do have a Maui here, but again, I can't play it. And this is where, again, that 1-drop Simba just really hurts me. So I'm just forced to play this 1-drop Simba and try to take out a Kita here, or take out a Tinkerbell. Again, just it doesn't really matter what I do here. I'm just not drawing the cards that I need. But I definitely misplayed earlier on. In the end, I don't think it makes a difference. I think this game just got too far away from me early on, especially with the Tinkerbell coming down from my opponent early. But yeah, definitely could have played a little bit better. Let me know in the comment section if you've made it this far what you would have done in order to maybe clutch out this game before the opponent started dropping those Tinkerbells. Now, despite this, I mean, they do have their card draw engine rolling. They have Hiram, they have Maurice's Workshop. We do finally get the Maui on board to take out those Tinkerbells, so I think the opponent's gone through either 2 or 3 Tinkerbells. Maybe they inked one as well. But drawing so many cards, like they're bound to draw just cards to start outing the small aggro threats that I might be dropping on them. So that in and of itself is an issue. They've got a lot of cards in hand, and there's the other Tinkerbell, which is going to finish off my Maui here. So yeah, that's definitely like at least their 3rd Tinkerbell. They drop yet another Oswald, but they're only on, what, like 2 lore? We top deck a Simba and play it. And again, we're just putting them on. You need to have the answer for these top decks, right? You need to have that constant removal, which I've played Sapphire Steel quite a bit. And I know, even though you have 3 or 4 pieces of removal, you run out. And, you're drawing cards, and you're drawing good cards, but they're not the cards you need in the moment to out what's threatening on the board at this time. So you can see here my opponent is digging. Do they end up finding what they need? The Oswald, they're supposed to reveal it, but it doesn't matter. I'm just like, yeah, it goes to the bottom though if it's not an item. Obviously, it's not an item because they would just play it for free if it was. But it's good to know what they put on the bottom, but I didn't. At this point, I was like, yeah, the game's probably over. I'd probably just lose anyways. But yeah, not a great spot. Looking back again, if I would have quested with the Kita, the opponent would have had 2 more Tinkerbells on board still. So like, being at 15, being at 17 lore, being able to close the game out with this Simba potentially, it's very hard to project what would have been the correct lines of play because again, my opponent was building up quite a strong board on their side as well. I think aggro, you have to just accept the fact once the game is too far away from you. They drop a lucky dime here too, so yeah, they don't end up outing my Simba. And to be fair, they may have had an out to the Simba. They just may have not opted to play it and opted for this setup instead because they're like, oh, he's not threatening lethal. Versus if I was threatening lethal, they may have played a little bit differently. But yeah, we draw 1-drop Kita, obviously very underwhelming, and so we take the L on this one. But yeah, that's going to be this video. If you made it this far, let me know in the comment section below. Thank you again for watching if you did. Quantum is out.